It's my great pleasure to be introducing our keynote speaker this morning, Carole Meehan. Welcome. Carole has taken up a position at the Auckland City Council. She joined them late in 2001. This is a really ambitious program that they're running there, and we've got Anna Ivanovic-Tung, who's a program manager with us today as well. Welcome, Anna. Auckland City Council are really ahead of the game, quite a long way in terms of public art planning. I think they've had like 6 or 7 years of writing policy and strategy, and they've been doing implementation of public art for, two or 3 or maybe longer. So anyway, there's a lot we can learn from them in terms of their models, some of the things that they already have in place. And the reciprocity that we've received from Auckland, I think, is really fantastic. I mean, Anna and Carole being here, they went and talked yesterday at Council. So I think we're going to learn a lot from this session, not just about the practical. Well, we won't be hearing about the practical, but they're sharing that with us in the background, be assured. But I think that the really important thing here is that the role of a really strong public art model within a city council, where it's really about like an art gallery, really, where it's resourced well, where it does have a curator, where it has a strong mandate, and a strong mandate for quality and excellence. And I think that's what you'll see coming through in the topic that Carole is going to be talking about today. There are a number of things that will be explored in her presentation, but I think some things that came out from discussion last night, which I thought was really, really interesting. We were talking around the importance and the role of a council in developing a public art program, and really Carole articulated it in 3 things. Quality engagement with artists, making sure that it is of the highest quality. Quality engagement with community, making sure that the community buy into the process, and the regulatory rules and the framework to actually help support a public art program. So these are all the steps that we'll be having to think about and work through here in Christchurch. Carole comes from the States. She has worked in a number of institutions there. She worked for 10 years in the curatorial staff of Boston's Institute of Contemporary Art, where she commissioned and produced over 25 temporary projects which aligned to locations such as historic sites and public parks. From 2008 to 2010, Meehan worked at the Houston Arts Alliance in Texas, where she developed major outdoor projects with Dennis Opperman and June Plancia, and worked in depth with the Houston Police Department on civic art projects. In 2011, she founded Art of Maine, a project series to provoke the flowering of broad humanistic perspectives on American heritage and the present-day challenges. Welcome, Carole. We're really looking forward to your address, which is titled Once in a Lifetime Opportunity.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for that warm welcome and introduction. I guess I found the challenges in the States so great that I left art at Maine and came here. And also, my talk isn't going to be too much about the nuts and bolts of the Auckland program, but if you have any questions about that or curiosity or want to come up and talk to us, please email myself, email Anna, follow our Facebook page. That would be wonderful. So, once in a lifetime opportunity. Good morning. I want to thank SCAPE for inviting me and the wonderful hospitality, and also to everyone who presented yesterday and with whom I was able to converse. I have learned a great deal from all of you, and this has helped me with rising to the occasion of being the one to open the 2nd day of this wonderful gathering. So since the first anniversary of the formation of Auckland Council, and I just will point out that it's Auckland Council, not Auckland City Council, I have served as its manager public art, and that was just 6 months ago, so late 2011, not 2001. I moved here from Boston, as Deborah said, to take on this role, and I am now very privileged to call New Zealand home. My first months here have been sweetened immeasurably by the tremendous privilege of working with the smartest and most motivated team in existence, which is ably led by Anna Ivanovic-Tung, Program Manager Public Art, who is with us today. Thank you, Anna. My 26-year practice as an arts professional is a hybrid of experience with government-seated arts and the public gallery and museum sector. In a way, I have ping-ponged between these two realms, finding frustration and joy in both. At this moment, I am still finding it a little hard to believe that I have the opportunity to provide the curatorial oversight and general leadership of the development of a regionally scaled program of public art for Auckland Council, which was created through Australasia's largest ever merger. Through this, 7 former city councils, with the former Auckland City Council being one of those, were disestablished in order to form a single governing body that provides regional oversight for the new supercity that is Auckland. The governing body, comprised of 21 councillors and Mayor Len Brown, form the top layer of a co-governance structure that includes 21 local boards scattered across the region. Other oversight bodies include the Maori Statutory Board, that includes representation from all 19 of Auckland's recognized iwi, and several external advisory panels, with one of these being the Advisory Panel for Public Art. This group includes 6 individuals with high levels of design and visual arts expertise who hold our feet to the fire in the maintaining of high aesthetic standards. Regarding the staffing landscape, Auckland Council employs some 8,500 people when you add together the personnel of its internal departments and that of its handful of council-controlled organizations, with Auckland Transport and Waterfront Auckland among these. Although now 18 months old, Council is a still evolving, sprawling, messy, and very dynamic place to work. The title of my session today, hold on, I just lost my place, was inspired by the opening remarks delivered by Doug Mackay, Auckland Council CEO, when he addressed the full staff forum of Community Development, Arts and Culture, Public Arts Home Department last month. He referred to the potential of what might be done in the Supercity, which has recently adopted the Auckland Plan that envisions the area's future 30 years ahead. The co-governance framework referred to earlier, which allows for both regional oversight and effective grassroots engagement via the 21 local boards, indeed presents some formidable opportunities for many things, not the least of which is public art. This political and structural rebirth, if it can sustain, really does present a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Auckland, which does not at present have a significant public art legacy. We are at a type of a ground zero moment. This moment in Christchurch, of course, presents a ground zero opportunity for very different reasons. Both cities have a shot at making history and restoring the importance of art to the state, the realm in which the highest form of fellowship occurs, according to Aristotle. I say restore, since to me it seems that in the 20th century, as well as in the early years of the 21st, the visual arts have been profoundly misaligned. And this is the discipline area most associated with public art, which in its own right has seen more than its share of challenges, with some of these being the result of collateral fallout of the wider problem. But perhaps New Zealand is uniquely positioned to lead a turnaround in the realm of public art. Its 2 largest cities both presently have the chance, and one hopes the motivation, to create a new paradigm that restores art as a natural and expected element of city building. I will explore this in my remarks today, but first, let's consider for a moment the underlying existing conditions. So apologies in advance, but before I launch into a micro rant about the 20th century's wider issues with the visual arts, I should make it clear that the last thing I am is a square or fuddy-duddy when it comes to art. My interests encompass quite a span, from the most conservative to the most far-out work. I believe this breadth of interest is essential for an arts professional with a set of responsibilities such as I have, but it can present some problems, especially when you assume that those you are dealing with will have as much enthusiasm for the most bizarro piece of performance work as they will for an exquisite bronze. The easy way out for some may be to stay away from these topics when outside of their artistic bubble, and this does happen. The director of a major contemporary art museum in the U.S. disclosed to me that she will only talk about art with trustees and other close associates of the institution. The lack of a shared frame of reference when trying to speak with others makes doing so too painful. As Auckland's manager public art, I don't have the luxury of being so selective. Happily, I relish engagement with so-called lay people, which likely accounts for my departure from the museum world in order to return to the government sphere, but I'm still stunned on a daily basis by how most lack even a basic framework for visual art, and by extension, public art. And after 6 months here in New Zealand, I now understand that for many in this country, public art means public sculpture, which suggests that a particular genre within public art is understood as the whole. In a country with such a rich sculptural tradition, both pre- and post-colonial, this comes as no surprise. But to me, this is not unlike equating the evening news broadcast with all of television. So what's going on with the larger world of visual arts? With approximately 4 years standing between us and the 100th birthday of Duchamp's fountain, we could argue that its influence as art's game changer has resulted in a mixed legacy. The visual arts space in the 20th century, as that of the early 21st continues to be, was overfilled with debates around objecthood, automatic production and process, seemingly endless and repetitive inquiries into what constitutes the art object, with these often taking the form of demonstration projects that too often resemble art school exercises in order to bring home the conclusion once again that, oh yeah, the art object can be anything. And as we heard from Biljana last evening, Tino Segal is possibly the only artist in recent years to truly push an understanding of the art object into uncharted territory. Swirling around all of this is the field's increasing adherence to critical distance, prioritizing credentials over creativity, the persistent validation of clever regurgitations of the ideas and work of others over original expression, and a propensity to overthink the meaning of activity in a realm of human existence that, even though complex, profound, and rich, is, at the end of the day, really not all that complicated. On the other hand, the hundreds of public art programs in the United States that operate within or in conjunction with governmental capital works programs are fueled by formula-driven processes that often boil down to a type of gamesmanship that artists with a suitable mindset and skill set successfully master. Even in these times in which credentials are king, decisions about the awarding of public art projects are made not by professionals with expertise, but by committees. Even though these typically include one or more arts professionals, their deliberations must progress according to the protocol allowed by the rules of community process, and not as nuanced qualitative debate. In the all too frequent instances when public complaint about public art arises, the arts administrators who work in this arena respond according to the methods that the public art profession has endorsed, which is to defend process over product. This approach seems disconcertingly akin to an apologia of the just following orders variety, and if applied to comparable complaints regarding a museum exhibition, the notion of a museum director defending the curatorial vetting process to the public rather than the exhibition itself is potentially hilarious. In one realm, there are no rules, no clear endpoints, myriad questions, but no answers, while in the other, it is all about rules and outcomes that are too often neutered, decorative versions of art, and with the burden of providing all kinds of answers, with these often being in the realm of solving urban design problems. The former frequently declares its inherent right to public support of its unfettered creative. So when I say the former, I'm talking about the art world proper here. It frequently declares its inherent right to public support of its unfettered creative freedom that is an end in and of itself, while the latter rationalizes its formulaic methods, to which it stubbornly adheres, as necessary to ensuring public fairness in the use of public funds. But what is curious is that the former enjoys equivalent levels of public support, as most museums and public galleries are either government entities or incorporated charities. I offer the above not to disrespect people's hard work or good intentions, but as a possible framework for understanding why the notion of art in the public realm is such an alien one to so many. It is possible that if the wider art world were better understood and provided true common ground, then it could absorb or even rectify the public art realm's peculiarities, with these likely the result of its foundations in mid-20th century efforts to solve institutional blandness by legislating art enhancements, rather than as a result of deeper, more fundamental purposes that are in keeping with the healthy nurturing of the public sphere, a topic discussed last night by Biljana in relation to China. But the broader realm of art that should provide such a foundation is generally a more curious place than the world of public art, while seeming to have no apparent connection to it. This compounded confusion leaves the layperson profoundly disinterested at best, and at worst, hostile in times of financial difficulty. Given such conditions, the community's lack of comprehension of public art, which naturally leads to questions around its support, should not come as any surprise, but the consequences are nevertheless quite grave. What is discouraging about the progress of discourse on this topic is that the identification of these issues is nothing new. Patricia Phillips' essay, Out of Order, The Public Art Machine, which first appeared in 1988 in Art Forum, reads as freshly as if written yesterday. Therein, she decries the many missed opportunities in the realm of public art, which she attributes to its rigid practices and absence of a solid raison d'etre. She points optimistically to artist-initiated projects outside the government sector that treat public space as a fluid, dynamic realm with more potential for instilling meaning than is possible in the bits and bobs of leftover space and capital works projects to which public art is often relegated. This is all well and good, and as noted by Dr. French yesterday, is the approach that has been used effectively by Creative Time in New York City for decades. And Biljana talked last night about instances in which guerrilla tactics may be quite justified. But Auckland and Christchurch are each preparing for the regeneration and transformation of their respective urban fabrics. For public art to secure a firm toehold within these efforts, it needs to behave in grown-up ways that are neither too polite and tidy nor too cheeky and disruptive, while clearly signaling that the creation of public space, in whatever form it takes or context in which it exists, that nurtures the well-being of humans is essential to city business. How might we set the stage for all of this? As a start, I would absolutely support Dr. French's proposition that the right way forward includes a mix of social practice, fresh approaches to the memorial, and integration into urban regeneration. And it goes without saying that the ability to work collegially and effectively with others is a must, which should include more cross-fertilization between the two worlds of art as described here and among these three approaches. I will offer some propositions for improving the ground, turning the soil, if you will, for public art generally and for the New Zealand context. Some of this may seem counter to the conventional wisdom that is generally accepted in the art world, but I will ask you to bear with me. First, we who navigate and lead in the worlds of art must step up and acknowledge that responsibility for the wider world's lack of comprehension of the importance of the arts sits with us. I completely sympathize with Biljana's recounts of the challenge of proposing unusual art interactions with store owners and the like. I have been there too, believe me. But who else can impart an understanding about our work if not us? What does it mean when a museum director is unable or unwilling to talk about her area of expertise with ordinary folk? And the strategies for raising awareness of the arts that are implemented by those who should know better can be woeful. A campaign along these lines delivered a few years ago by the Americans for the Arts, the United States' leading arts advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C., is headed by the text, "Why Some People Think Virginia Woolf is the State's Official Animal." At the bottom is the proclamation, "Art, ask for more." The problems with this are myriad and very familiar, in that it includes both condescension to the American public for supposedly not recognizing the name of a British author. It's got this whole poster, and it has all of these little bits and bobs about, have your tea, mate, and it's like, okay. The notion of the Virginia Woolf is clearly in no danger of being absurdly conflated with the identification of a wild animal on the other hand, even by those who've never read a single book. And the message also really displays the very common timidity that we find with these things, as in you want us to ask for and not demand more. Second, and related to the above, artists must also step up. A point made by Umberto Crinca, artistic director of AS220 in Providence, Rhode Island, who was in New Zealand recently and gave a keynote address at the Museum's Aotearoa conference. Did anybody come across Bert while he was here? Oh, okay, great. We talk about artists as being leaders, problem solvers, and so on, but do we really mean it? Is it possible to reverse the deeply seated negative perceptions that exist about artists, as relayed by Hugh yesterday, but by no means unique to his situation? Through example, showing, not telling, results, and not through the making of unsubstantiated claims? The truth is, there are not many examples of artists with the courage of Ai Weiwei, yet another reference to Biljana's bracing address last night. There are many other artistic practices that offer useful models, of course. What is compelling is when an artist's message breaks through the usual art world discourse and into other realms, because it truly grabs a hold of the day's pressing matters. So to that end, I will briefly mention Janet Eckelman, an artist based in the Boston area, whose TED Talk has had nearly 612,000 visits. I checked this morning because not too long ago she had passed the 500,000 mark. Can't really see that, but this is a look at her first permanent work, which is in Porto, Portugal. And this temporary work is entitled 1.26. And I will read some text lifted from a post on the 25th of September of last year by Din Hagney on the Art Life, a website, about this project. Originally designed as a public commission in Denver for the Denver Office of Cultural Affairs Public Art Program, 1.26 pushes the ephemeral nature of public sculpture to a new level. The commission was intended to reveal contemporary relations between different nations in the Americas. Eckelman's response took ideas of temporality and interconnections and combined them with 3D computer simulation of the outcome of a Pacific-wide tsunami. This was around the same time as the Chilean earthquake in early 2010, when NASA announced that the length of the average day had been shortened by 1 minute and 26 seconds as a result of quake shifting the Earth's axis by 8 centimeters. 1.26 is a palpable representation of a potentially disastrous event for civilizations on the Pacific Rim. By embedding measurements with the latest astronomical and oceanographic technology, she has revealed the ways in which science can directly collaborate with art to achieve the kind of positive conscious awareness that is so difficult to communicate, at least without sounding either sentimental or apocalyptic. Public works with complex messages and layered entry points like 1.26 can ultimately engage audiences without isolating them. So when I was visiting one day before departing, visiting with Janet one day before coming here, I admit to being a bit surprised when she casually mentioned that Al Gore had visited. He had sought her out because he was intrigued by the potential of her work to model major environmental shifts with such poetry. So the relevance of this example for Christchurch is painfully obvious, but this is a concrete one in which an artist clearly demonstrates the ability to be at the center of the action and not on the sidelines, and doing things like hosting world leaders in her studio. So that's my proposition for artists. Thirdly, another one is that I think we should make use of the particular advantage enjoyed by New Zealand as a small and highly regarded country that is relatively free from natural predators. It may boldly reshape the paradigm for public art. The autonomy it enjoys from its relative geographic isolation is not an inconsiderable factor. Take it from someone, me, who has lived and worked for decades in Boston, which cowers in the long shadow cast by New York City that absolutely affects the behavior of philanthropists, collectors, and others whose decisions influence the health of its artistic landscape. Also, if New Zealand's public art practices were to boldly engage its bicultural policy whenever possible, this would naturally move this sphere beyond the narrow secularism of the art world and into a deeper framework that has persisted throughout the ages. And finally, to make the case for public art that most assume is not possible to make, and that is the economic one, data is of course needed. So when developers or the central government are deliberating investment in the city's cultural well-being, the economic implications of their choices should be understood. So while I just beat up on the Poor Americans for the Arts about their promotional campaign, their data collection that demonstrates the impact of the arts on things like job creation, collateral spending, and revenue generation is very compelling. So if you log onto the Americans for the Arts website, there's a clear section for what they call economic impact studies, and they release fresh studies every few years. Very, very interesting stuff to look at. So on this theme of economic impact, I'll share some information about a project now that is based in Providence, Rhode Island, where AS220 referred to earlier is based. This project, entitled Waterfire, can rightfully share credit with Umberto, which has created 50 jobs, or AS220 itself has created 50 jobs, for the permanent turnaround of this small American city, which in the mid-1980s was practically a ghost town and in its own ground zero state. I will read a few excerpts, modified ever so slightly for this occasion, from an essay I contributed to the 3rd issue of the Journal of the Public Art Dialogue, which was published last month. Waterfire is an enormously popular project in Providence, Rhode Island that has engendered levels of audience volition that are likely unprecedented. A pageant of fire, water, sound, and people, it has been presented several times each year since 1994. After accumulating a decade's worth of audience testament to the important place the project holds in people's lives, the project's creator, Barnaby Evans, commissioned a formal audience and economic impact study on its 10th anniversary. So in 2004, Waterfire was estimated to have attracted over 1.1 million visitors during 14 full lightings of all 100 of its braziers. It basically has 3 rivers connected with bonfires all running down through it, as you can see. The direct economic impact of this year's season is calculated to be between $33.2 million and $40.5 million, thus generating $2.32 million in revenue for the state of Rhode Island. Since these calculations are taken from the central areas of Waterfire and do not include restaurant, business, or foot traffic in the blocks immediate adjacent to the project, the actual economic impact could be as much as 20% higher, according to the study. These are figures from just 1 year's activity of a project that has operated at more or less full steam for 17 years and counting. Waterfire is also useful to consider in light of a few themes that were referred to yesterday, including the idea of using the public sphere to nurture a civil society, as well as the need to create a vibrant city that attracts visitors and new residents. Further, the project is useful as a space for reflection and remembrance, thus serving as a type of living memorial. To underscore these points, I will share a few more words from my essay. A scan of the ocean of visitor comments about Waterfire collected over the years reveals that these most often alight on the complementary themes of heightened personal and communal experience. Moving declarations such as the following attest to the project's ability to console. I live under terrible stress, depression. Nothing in this world relaxes me and makes me feel quite like Waterfire. And I thought tonight would be very painful coming here without her, but Waterfire has brought me a sense of inner peace, tranquility, and a serene sense of closure. This was from a gentleman who had proposed to his wife at a Waterfire event. Further, its impact on crowd dynamics through which a sense of common humanity is imparted are evidenced in expressions such as, I've never before seen so many varied people sharing one space with such harmony, such fluidity, such graceful peace, and in a world that misses a living spirit, this is just what we all need. One visitor who by profession is responsible for managing crowd dynamics says, I am a police officer in Philadelphia, and like most people in law enforcement, I do not feel comfortable in crowds. I was really surprised. The crowds were large, but the people were great. I think one statistic that I didn't share is that a single lighting of Waterfire attracts between 40,000 and 100,000 people. So it's crowded, but it's fun. Waterfire holds ample space in which one may mourn, rejoice, or do whatever is most needed at a given moment. It places art in the service of human experience without trying to define or preordain what this might be. This is ultimately affirming and may suggest a promising way forward. So in closing, I'll just say that, while I was still living back home in the U.S., the U.S.'s inability to recover with any robustness from the Great Recession had incited many calls for what was referred to as structural economic reform. And then sometimes on the Sunday morning talk shows, some guy would say, well, what is structural economic reform? But having observed and worked within a stagnant public art framework at various points over my career for the past quarter century, I guess what I am proposing is the necessity of the structural reform of public art. The stakes are very high, and while the path ahead may not be very clear at this point, we should begin with a first step, since we in New Zealand are very likely looking at a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make history with public art. So let's bat above our weight and work together. Thank you.